everybody, and welcome to O Really Podcast. My name is Jess, and I am your podcast host today. Now, I love talking about vulnerable, challenging, and spicy taboo topics, which is what this podcast is all about. And the episode today is actually kind of talking about all those kind of things. You know, it's a vulnerable topic. It definitely can be challenging, but it's 100% on the spicy side. So today we're diving into an episode all about the vulva, you know, the female anatomy, and learning our pleasure centers. Like, as a woman myself, I identify as a woman, I have a vulva. I am a bit embarrassed to admit that I don't really understand it. And I'm even more embarrassed to admit that I am medical trained. I have been a nurse for 11 years and I put in a lot of catheters and I see a lot of vulvas, and I'm a bit stumped when it comes to the anatomy. You know, I know the very basic 101 training of an anatomy, but I definitely don't know a lot about the pleasure side of things. And that is what I want to learn about. You know, I've got one body, I've got one life. I want to know and understand my pleasure centers, because whether I'm pleasing myself, doing self-pleasure, or whether I'm intimate with a partner and I want to be able to verbalize what feels good, what doesn't feel good, like, that is so important in life. And I'm in my 30s now, and I'm even more so like, that is it. I want to learn. Like, I just want to enjoy this life. So if you're a vulva owner yourself, you need to listen to this episode. You need to share it with your friends. If you are someone who wants to please a vulva, then this episode is for you as well, because we go into such amazing detail about the anatomy. And I interviewed Eleanor Hadley, and she is the go-to person to interview for something like this. Like, I'm such a fan of her, and I fangirl over her because she is just such an incredible person, and she's so passionate. She's a certified sex coach, and we go into like a bit more detail of like her job role in the episode. So I won't go into too much about that now, but all I can say is, you know, right now, get onto her Instagram and have a look at her work, because you can see just how educated this gal is. She's so incredible. So I'm so stoked. I've honestly got the best podcast guest ever for you today. And like, you just share this episode, because we need to learn our anatomy so much more. So without further ado, enjoy the episode and reach out to me if you've got any questions. We are going to destigmatize talking about this stuff, because we need to talk about it more. So enjoy the episode, everybody. And just a heads up, if you would like to watch the video, Eleanor does get a doll and also a plush cushion that replicate the vulva, so we can go through the anatomy. So Spotify and YouTube are the best platforms to be able to listen to this episode, but then also watch it, so that you can see what we're going on about. But otherwise, we have done our very best to kind of describe what we're talking about, so you can kind of get the visual in your mind to learn as well. But enjoy the episode. I think you're going to absolutely love it. And reach out to me anytime if you've got any awesome topics that you want me to talk about. All right, bye guys. All right, everybody, it's finally time. I have this absolute beautiful goddess with me. Finally, her name is Eleanor Hadley. She is honestly the most incredible person. I've met her face to face. I've been so lucky to actually meet her twice at the SEXPO Australia in Brisbane. And she's finally with me on Oh Really Podcast. So welcome to the podcast, Eleanor Hadley.
Thank you so much for having me. I love chatting about all things sex and pleasure. So I can't wait to get into it.
You are the pleasure queen, and that is why I have chosen you specifically for this particular topic. Now, before we dive into our topic today, I would love for you to describe in your words what it is that you do, because you get asked this so much and it's complex, right? And it's taboo. Explain to me, what do you do, Eleanor, what is your job?
So I'm a certified sex educator and sensual movement practitioner as well. And so what that means is I basically get to talk and teach all about sex, pleasure, movement, embodiment, all day, every day. And so to do that, I work with various brands, writing content, writing articles, speaking on stages like SEXPO, where we met, and also creating content online, and my own courses where I teach practical, fun sex education and also movement practices and embodiment as well.
Well, it definitely sounds like a very fun job to get into. I guess, how do you get into this kind of line of work? Is it just something like a passion thing of yours that you decided to dive into and kind of create your own brand? Were you doing this, before? Like, kind of explain, how do you get into this kind of role?
So the way that I got into it was just a gradual unfolding. So I didn't sort of set out to go, I'm going to become a sex educator and that's my goal. I didn't even realize that that was a job. It was just following the breadcrumbs. One thing led to another. And so I suppose the start of the journey was back about 10 years ago now. I started pole dancing classes, and that was my first introduction to a style of dance that was really about exploring my sensuality. And so I got obsessed, absolutely addicted to pole dancing, bought my own studio, ran my own studio for 4 years, taught classes, really saw the powerful, transformative impact of sensual movement and this amazing, inspiring way that movement could lead to these ways of feeling so deeply confident in your body. And so that inspired me to then sell my studio and create a practice of my own, which was my own style of movement that was more focused on embodiment as opposed to the performative element. And then I focused all about sensuality throughout that journey. It was very much focused on everything to do with the senses. And that naturally led me to study life coaching, where I specialized in sensuality, and then naturally got very interested in sexuality and started studying sexuality, became a certified sex coach as well throughout that journey. And it's just sort of blossomed. So I never really set out to be in this role, but it's just sort of revealed itself to me throughout the journey. And it's just so fun. And I'm so grateful to be where I am right now.
It honestly suits you so much. Like, you can see how much passion you have with what you do. And that's why it's like, I love that you explained the little breadcrumbs, because it's obviously led you, little by little into this incredible role. And you've created such an incredible brand for yourself. Like, it's a very powerful thing to see you do your thing, and if people haven't seen Eleanor, like, jump on her Instagram and have a look after our chat, then you can see all her Instagram videos. They're so educational, they're fun, they're sexy. Like, people just want to be around you because it's just such a fun vibe, and everyone wants to feel that vibe, and everyone wants to feel confident and sexy. And like, we have one life, right? We should feel confident and sexy. It's such a fun thing. I know that you've mentioned in your Instagram stories that people think that because you're a sex coach, that they think that, like, you're in the bedroom physically watching people have sex. How often does this occur?
Quite often, yeah, people assume that I'm in there with a whistle and just like, oh no, wrong hole. This is how you do it. That's not right. It's not exactly like that. Look, I'm sure there's a place for that, and I think that would be a very, very cool service to offer, but it's not the way that I work. I tend to focus more on, in my one-on-one coaching, talking through all of the blockages that people might have around sex, around feeling deep pleasure, around connecting with themselves and with their lovers, and how we can kind of move through, how we can invite in more pleasure into their daily life so that their sex life is therefore enhanced. Talking through issues with libido and sex drive, and just helping people to understand their sexuality more, because it's something that we're just not taught about at all. And I think that that's such a shame. And that's really where I come in. I want you to feel empowered in your sexuality and feel really well equipped to have the best sex of your life, and not feel like it's something that is scary or taboo or too much and that you shouldn't talk about.
Yeah, couldn't agree anymore. I feel like sex ed really needs to be looked at in high school, and, you just don't get exposed to this stuff. And thank God we're in the world of podcasting now and social media, because even though they can have a negative impact, especially social media, on people, there's actually a lot of spaces now that are kind of moving in a really positive direction, like yourself, and talking about these taboo topics. And it's exactly what Oh Really podcast is there for as well, is to talk about taboo topics, to break down stigmas, and to talk about, like, vulnerable, challenging, but also the spicy stuff. Because, I mean, come on, we all love listening to spicy stuff.
It's the best stuff. It's so much fun.
It's the most fun. And today's particular episode is not actually even just for vulva owners themselves. It's for people that want to please other vulvas. So people listening, this is going to be a really educational episode because we're going to break down anatomy. And I'm in my 30s, and to be honest, and I'm a bit ashamed to say this, but like I'm still understanding and learning my own anatomy as a vulva owner, you know, and I'm only just now in my 30s kind of understanding my body and my pleasure centers and starting to kind of relax a bit more in the bedroom and use my voice a bit more and get experimental. And this takes time, and I'm a very confident person. So people are like, I feel like the people that don't talk to their friends and have those open discussions and, you know, aren't very confident, they're going to be sitting in this background, like missing out so much fun stuff in their life, and they need to listen to this episode and be inspired. So, I mean, you're the best person to talk about this because you know vulvas very well. Can we just go through, I guess, the anatomy? Let's go through the anatomy of a vulva because you're going to teach me some shit. Trust me, I'm a nurse and I don't really understand it.
You know, that doesn't even surprise me. So firstly, I want everyone listening and you to know that it's totally normal that you don't know your anatomy. We are not taught. We're taught very basically in sex ed, like the ovaries and the fallopian tubes, just in theory, but we don't really understand too much of what it does and why it's important. But in terms of like external and internal pleasure anatomy, absolutely not covered at all. And so there's no wonder that you don't know. And there's things that you're still learning. And if you're listening and you're like, I actually don't know what that thing is that she's talking about, it makes sense. And so I'm going to try and share in the most accessible way possible a little bit more about your vulva anatomy, your pleasure anatomy in particular, and how you can use this to feel more empowered in your sexuality and to explore more pleasure as well. So shall I get started with bringing out the model?
Bring out the model. And people listening as well, you notice that we are saying vulva. And the reason we're saying vulva is a lot of people say the word vagina thinking that they're talking about kind of all of the female anatomy, but the vagina is just one section of the anatomy, which we'll go into, okay? So we're going to be using the terminology vulva throughout this, but we do have a really fun model. So if you are listening and you want to watch the video version, it's going to be on Spotify and YouTube, but we will try our best, you know, for the audio listeners to explain what this model is, but it's a fun model. Have you named your model?
Okay, so I have a couple. Firstly, I've got Vivian over here. So this is Vivian. She's my OG, Vivian the vulva. She's more of a plush cushion where you can actually sort of feel all the different parts. You can sort of put your fingers inside and feel all the various spots inside. And then I have a new one, which is quite fun. And that's this other one here, which kind of shows the external and then the internal kind of cross section. So that's a really interesting way to look at it as well. So I'll start by just sort of talking through our anatomy from the outside in. So as you mentioned, we always refer to the external anatomy as our vulva. Now, the vagina is actually the internal, it's the vaginal canal, and that is the part that is all inside. When we're just talking about the whole anatomy, we like to use the term vulva because it's a bit more encompassing. So from the outside in, we have our mons pubis, which is the sort of pubic mound, and that's sort of at the top.
Oh, which is also called the shame bone.
The shame bone.
They call it the shame bone in the Tantra world. Yeah, your mons pubis, they call it the shame bone.
Why shame?
Because we hold so much shame in that region. I went to a Tantra workshop and we learnt how to do a mons pubis massage on each other. So I had to do it to complete random because I was doing a workshop. But yeah, that mons pubis is something that I didn't even realize was even a part of my anatomy, to be honest. And how would you explain that mons pubis section for the audio listeners? How would you explain that? It's kind of like under your belly, like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's sort of, I suppose it's the area that is, you know, a few fingers width below your navel and before like the top of your labia or the clitoris. And it's that sort of mound where you can also feel your pelvic bone as well. So it's that whole kind of area is the mons pubis. Shame bone is fascinating. I've not heard that, but interesting, like somatically speaking, yes, we can hold emotions in lots of areas of our body. So that's fascinating. Okay, so then we have our labia. So we have two different types of labia. I like to refer to them as the inner and the outer labia. So the outer labia is the skin that is most similar to like your thigh, sort of flesh, and covered with hair, or maybe it's removed. But that is our outer lips, if you will. Now we have some sensation there, not quite as much as we go internal. And the outer lips, the outer labia, they may sort of come fully together. They may be slightly asymmetrical. They may have like space for the inner labia as well, or it might completely cover the inner labia. Totally depends. Everyone's quite different, just like we all have different size noses, different size ears, different shapes of all different parts of our body. Same goes for our labia. And there's not one way that is how it's meant to be. It's just you have inner lips and you have outer lips. They might be all different shapes and sizes. So then we go in slightly further and we have our inner lips. So they are our labia, our inner labia. They are often referred to as labia minora and majora, but I think that those terms essentially insinuate that one should be bigger, one should be smaller, and I don't believe that's the case because everyone is quite different. So that's why I like to refer to more outer and inner. If I show you Vivian, for those watching, you'll see this outside section is the labia, the outer labia, and then this inside section here is the inner labia. Now on this model, on Vivian, her inner labia is longer, and some may have inner labia that is a bit more asymmetrical. It might kind of bloom and butterfly out. It might be a little bit more shapely. It might be quite sort of small and petite and quite short. Everyone's is incredibly different, but this is more of that sort of lovely soft tissue, a lot more sensitive, coming around the vaginal opening and the urethra as well. Now, if we get a little closer into the vulvar anatomy, we'll find the clitoral hood, which is the really sensitive tissue that covers the clitoris. Again, everyone's clit is a different size and shape. Some is quite petite and completely covered by the clitoral hood most of the time. Others is a lot larger, and the hood is a lot smaller and pulled back naturally. Or when you're more aroused, maybe it'll pull back even more. So everyone's is very different, but we have the clitoral hood and the clitoris itself. Now, the glans clitoris is what we see. That's the little pearl at the top that everyone kind of makes jokes about that people can't find, but it's right there. But this is a really, really fascinating part of our anatomy. And it's wildly important, very understudied, but absolutely amazing. So I'm going to go into the clitoris a little bit more before I talk through like the vaginal opening and the vaginal canal.
Please do. Do you know, I only just discovered there was a clitoral hood like a year or two ago. I didn't even know there was such a thing as the hood. And then I realized as you pull back, I'm like, there it is. I see. Like, yeah, honestly, isn't that wild that I only just found out there was a hood? I'm already learning so much as well. Oh my God.
But also, you know, it's very rare that we are, you know, encouraged to look at our own labia, at our own vulva. So often we either don't see any other vulvas at all, or we only see them in porn, and it's not like a close-up, in-depth view. And so you're forgiven for not knowing that there was a hood there. If we take the time, though, to actually look and explore our own anatomy, it can be really, really helpful because you're like, oh, cool, that's what's going on there. And when I touch here, it feels really good. And this is what it looks like aroused, because our anatomy will look really different when we're not aroused compared to when we are. And that's a really fun thing to explore as well. So back to the clitoris.
Everyone get a mirror out.
Now, with the model that I have here for those watching, this is a really interesting one because you can see the outside, and then I'm going to open it up and you're going to see essentially what is underneath. Now, the clitoris is such a fascinating organ because we tend to think of it as just this little bud, this tiny little spot that feels really, really good when you touch it. Now, there's more than 10,000 nerve endings in just the glans clitoris, which is the tip, the head of the clitoris, the part that we see. And the main function, the primary function of the clitoris is pleasure. It does also impact, sexual arousal and lubrication and therefore like procreation. But its primary purpose is pleasure. It doesn't really have much else to do. That's why it exists, so that you can feel really, really good. Now, we often think of it as just this tiny little bud and that's all. But actually, it's so much more. There's a lot more going on underneath the surface, behind the scenes, if you will, that we can't visually see. But the clitoris actually extends underneath the skin throughout and around the whole vulva. So for those watching the video, you can see the big reveal here. Oops,
she's removing a layer, everybody.
Likes to go south. Okay, here we go. So for those who can see, yes, this is what the clitoris looks like. Now, what I'm showing here for those who are just listening is the entire structure of the clitoris within the context of the pubic bone, the urethra, and the vaginal canal. So it looks essentially like a cute little wishbone with arms and legs. So we've got the tip of the clitoris, which pokes out through the front of the body, essentially the exterior. You can see that part. But then what you're not seeing is all of the rest of the structure. And what this does is essentially we've got these arms. So kind of think of like a cute little person with a fun little head and then arms that are kind of out to the side and then like stumpy little legs. I hope that makes sense.
It does look like that. It actually does look like that.
It's quite cute. So the arms, which are the outer ones here, these are known as crura. You don't need to remember what anything's called, but essentially these arms are underneath our labia. So if I get Vivian out, the arms are going out and underneath the outer labia. So if you were to feel yourself and massage your outer labia close to the thigh, not all the way, but in between sort of like the labia itself, you're going to sort of massage and start to feel a little bit of pleasure there because it's connected to the clit. It is the clit, right? Then we move a bit closer and we've got what we can call the stumpy little legs. These are the clitoral bulbs, also known as vestibular bulbs, but we like to call them the clitoral bulbs. Now, these are more bulbous in nature, and they actually go around and kind of frame both the urethra, which is where we pee from, and the vaginal canal, which is where we experience sexual pleasure, where we, might insert things, fingers, dildos, penises, to feel pleasure. We also have menstruation that comes from there and also babies. So we have the different holes. Now, the bulbs of the clitoris are framing the urethra and the vaginal canal. And so what is really cool about this is that our clitoris is actually erectile tissue. So we know that people with penises have erectile tissue. When they get erect, when they get hard, what's happening is their penis is filling up with blood and they're creating this sense of sexual arousal, and boom, they get hard. We have the same thing, but it just looks slightly different. It looks like bulbs on either side of the vaginal canal.
Oh my God, mind blowing. So we get a hard on, but it's inside. It's underneath the layer.
Exactly. We also get a hard on. We get hard. We need to feel erect in a way as well. But the thing is, and the main difference that is incredibly important is that for a penis, it can take a matter of seconds or minutes to get that blood flow and feel hard and ready for penetrative sex in particular. For us, these beautiful vestibular bulbs, they take between 20 and 40 minutes to fill with blood and to really become engorged and erect. And so we need time to be ready for sex. And what's really interesting about these bulbs, the placement, they're on either side of that vaginal canal. Now, most of the time, they won't be big, bulbous, and erect like this. They'll be flaccid, like a flaccid penis. And they'll just be sort of sitting there, empty, not really ready for sex. And so as soon as they start to arouse and get more engorged, they essentially kind of push up against the outer walls of the vaginal canal, which means that anything that is inserted is going to feel way better because it's kind of pushing up against the clitoris. Now, if you aren't sufficiently aroused, penetrative sex isn't going to feel as great because our vaginal canal is nowhere near as innervated, which is full of nerve endings, as the clitoris itself. So the main message here is take your time.
Wow. So I guess people listening to this, like that want to please somebody, like please vulva owners, when they're thinking of that 20-minute mark, I think some people think that means like full foreplay for 20 minutes. But are we talking like, creating a really sensual space, kissing, touching, all of that is what actually can get those zones activated? It's not like I have to give her foreplay for 20 minutes straight before I can enter her. It's not all about that. Hey, it's about those other kind of sensual activities around the bedroom.
Yes, and I am an advocate for removing the word foreplay from our vocabulary, because what foreplay insinuates is that the real sex starts upon penetration. And personally, I think that's an incredibly heteronormative view of sex. When we have this penetration focus on sex, it kind of it makes us feel as though anything else, any other acts aren't enough. And so I really want to reframe this perspective and invite you to see any sexual act that is bringing sexual pleasure as sex, and not just think, oh, I need to do all of these other things until I can finally get to quote unquote real sex, which is in my mind currently penetration. So yes, we want to build up that arousal, which is going to build up that blood flow and build that sort of engorgement through non-penetrative sexual acts before we do any type of penetration. And so, yeah, that might look like going down on your lover for 20 minutes, but it also might look like taking some time to really seduce the whole body. I always talk from the outside in. It's really important that we see the entire body as an erogenous zone, as opposed to, okay, cool, I want to have sex. I'm going to go straight for the vulva and, aggressively sort of like DJ the clit and then jam my fingers in and like hump and pump, and like it's too focused on the genitals. Like let's see the rest of the body. Take your time, flirt with me. Let's make eye contact and have great conversation and stimulate my biggest sexual organ, which is my brain, so that I'm turned on and I'm like, fuck, I want to be with this person. Then start from the outside in and work through the non-erogenous zones. Hold my hand, do that gentle touch, the non-sexual touch that makes me a little bit excited, because I'm like, oh, how far are we going to go? Then kissing, the lips, tongue, had so many beautiful nerve endings that can connect to our genitals as well and turn on the same areas of the brain, our ears, our neck, breasts, nipples, nipple stimulation. If you're stimulating the nipples, the same part of the brain is being lit up as clitoral stimulation. So it's kind of let's connect everything. Let's connect all these dots. Tease me throughout the thighs and all over the body, and like work from the outside in of the actual vulva, massaging the labia, the outer labia, the inner labia, then the clit. And then eventually you'll get to the point where you're ready to sort of receive any type of internal penetration if you want to. But remember that penetration does not equal sex. That's just a style, and you get to choose what style you want and if you are ready for penetration or not, because it doesn't feel good for everyone. And especially if you haven't taken your time, it's not going to feel anywhere near as good as it could. My main rule is taking your time, but I also invite you to consider being so ridiculously turned on to the point where you are almost like begging, craving. You're like, I need something inside of me immediately, otherwise I'm going to combust. If you do it any earlier, the pleasure potential is just not completely there.
This was incredible. And I couldn't agree with any more of that. And I'm really glad you pointed out the fact that I even said foreplay, because we just get so into that terminology these days, hey, of like, oh yeah, foreplay, and then like so focused on penetration. Like, I know for myself, just like learning with my own anatomy and what I like, I have been trying to explain to people that I'm, being sexual with, and I'm like, I want to just focus on everything else besides the penetration act. Like, I just want to, focus on sensuality and kiss and touch and intimacy, because from that moment onwards, that's me being pleasured. Like, and I'm just loving every experience. It's not about the big O, the big orgasm finish. It's not always about that. And I try really hard to get that focus out, because some days I may not come, and that is totally fine. It doesn't mean I didn't enjoy the experience. But I really love the fact that you're talking about all the different steps, and it's not about sex doesn't start at penetration. So I honestly love that you said that. I'm learning a lot, and I'm sure the listeners are just like, whoa.
I think it's a really, really wonderful thing to have this focus of pleasure-centric sex instead of orgasm-centric sex. And what you might find happens is the more that you focus on pleasure and enjoying the entire journey instead of racing to a finish line and thinking this is the whole purpose of it, is to have this big explosive like orgasm and come. Instead, focus on how good every single moment feels, and you most likely will have more orgasms as a result. But focus less on the orgasm as the goal. We're not doing goal-oriented sex, we're doing pleasure-oriented sex.
This is making me very horny. I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to get
welcome.
Freaky. You're welcome. You're like, I have that ability with people. Now, run me through some of your incredible courses that you've got on your website. So eleanorhadley.com. You have some pretty incredible courses. I know you've got your sensuality, sensual movement courses, and I've actually experienced one of your lap dance on stage in front of people. And I mean, I do not class myself as a bisexual lady. I'm very straight. I'm heterosexual, but it turned me on. I was like, and that's just the power of sensual movement. Hey, and just kind of, all those touch things that you did and looking into my eyes. And it is honestly an incredible experience. So I know you do your art of seduction classes. Run me through your other oral related classes.
Amazing. I'm very happy that you experienced my lap dance. You're a wonderful lap. So yes, I have the 2 movement-based courses. So the art of sensual movement, which is all floor work, embodied flow, and then the art of seduction, which is essentially how to give an embodied lap dance and a striptease as well, coming again from that embodiment focus as opposed to performative focus. And then I have 2 other courses. One is called Send Nudes. That's how to take really beautiful, spicy selfies and nudes. And then the oral focused one is called Tongue Tactics. And this is my most popular course by far. I have 2 versions, BJ Queen and Pussy Pro. So depending on who you like to lick and or suck, I've got you covered. So basically, Tongue Tactics is a really simple, easy to understand guide on exactly how to bring the most pleasure to your partner and how to go down all the tips and tricks that you need to know. It's very practical, very hands-on. So it's me sort of demonstrating with props. You'll see Vivian the vulva. You'll see like dildo sort of models as well. I also have waffles that I demonstrate on. And it's it's such a great course to learn very practical tips and tricks to like just absolutely understand exactly what to do. It's a how-to guide. And the reviews, Jess, holy moly, they are out of control. It's so wonderful.
I have been reading the reviews. They are so wild. And I love that you called them testimonials because people are moaning like crazy. And you've got, I mean, what's your latest count? You've been updating it so much. Are you up to like over 700?
Very close to 700. Yeah. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. That is so wild. And they are only $69 for the course, each course, which, I mean, great number, very specific to the oral world. Thank you for putting this stuff out there. We all need it, and I'm grateful.
It's my absolute pleasure. It's so wonderful to, like, especially with tongue tactics, have this as almost my legacy that I've been responsible for several amazing orgasms. So very happy with that.
All right, everybody, we're going to interrupt the episode because we want to know a little bit more about Eleanor Hadley. So we are going to play 2 truths and a lie. So Eleanor is going to give me a few scenarios here, and I have to guess which one's her truths and which one is her lie. Take it away, Eleanor.
Okay, so firstly, I was 28 when I bought my first dildo. I've never been to a sex party, and I once had sex with the owner of my gym in the studio between classes.
Oh, you've got me stumped here. Surely you didn't wait till 28 to get your first dildo. I mean, surely. And then, what was the second one again? Hang on, the second one.
I've never been to a sex party.
You stumped me. The sex party thing. To be honest, I've never seen you advertise going to sex parties. I kind of figured that you would go into like a tantra space, like that would kind of be your kind of area. But then you said you didn't know the shame bone. So I was like, oh, that's a very tantra thing. So I'm thinking maybe that one. And then having sex with the owner of the gym, I feel like that's pretty sexy. I mean, surely that's a real one. I feel like the fake one is, oh, wait, you said never been to a sex party. So that means, is that the truth? Oh my gosh. Oh, you've got me stumped here. Surely you had a dildo. Okay, fine. I think the lie is the gym guy.
Fascinating. Okay.
You didn't have sex.
Okay. So my lie is, I was actually a little bit sneaky with this one. The lie is that I have never been to a sex party, because in fact I have.
Oh, because you said never. Yes, that means you have. Yeah, you did trick me there.
Got that.
Of course you have. Yeah, you did get me. And you know what? People are being more sneaky with these 2 truths and a lie, honestly. I feel like I need to read it as I'm thinking about it because it's just like so difficult. I was like, surely you've been in that space. But now, does that mean, and then 28 with the dildo? Wait, what?
Yeah, I know. I bought my first dildo after I broke up with a long-term boyfriend. Had never had one before. Went to SEXPO actually. Oh no, I got a goodie bag at SEXPO, but I did get a dildo there. And my friends, after a breakup, they took me to a sex shop and they're like, we need to get you a dildo, girl. And it was massive and it like thrusted and it was like quite intimidating. I don't know why I went that intense, but I was like, if I'm going to get one, I'm better get like the really like epic one. So yeah, it took me a while to get there and look at me now.
Look at you now. I know, that is so wild. But you know, to be fair, I didn't really buy a dildo. I got the cervix serpent, and that was last year, and that I'm in my 30s. I'm about to turn 33. So technically, I didn't buy like a dildo for myself until I was 32.
See, there you go.
Yeah, it's just, and we're not putting our pleasure first. We got to start doing that, guys. And it's not always about internal penetration as well. You don't always have to do that. But yeah, dildos are a fun time. I'm learning about them too. Wow. Okay, you got me good there, Eleanor. Good job. All right, guys, we're going to get back into the episode now. Well, Eleanor, the only other question I have for you before we wrap up is I get asked this a lot as well. I am someone who's never experienced this squirting. I just want to know a quick fact on this. You know when people say, "Oh, it's not real. You're just peeing on somebody." It just we've gone through a bit of the anatomy now and we've gone through the clit and everything like that. What is squirting in your terms?
Okay, squirting is not pee. You will have several people who will try and quote a bogus research article that used like inaccurate details to say that it is pee. Now, look, squirting fluid comes from the same place. Sorry, it doesn't come from the same place as pee, but it has similar properties. So it can be similar in some ways, but it doesn't have the odor. It doesn't have the same PSA as well. So there's a few key differences. It is a different type of fluid. It doesn't have the same color either. And so what's happening when you squirt is we have these Skene's glands that are sort of on either side of the urethra, and there's fluid there that can be released through certain type of stimulation. Typically, it's stimulation of what we call the G-spot, which is behind the scenes of the clitoris, actually. It's not really a spot. It's just an area, a zone that comprises the clitoris and the urethra, clitorourethral complex. And this is an area that, when stimulated in a certain way, can have a release of fluid, but it is not pee. So if anybody tells you that it is, they are incorrect.
I love that. And that's why I wanted to touch on it, because it's just that thing that always gets spoken about. Like, no such thing. It's just peeing. And I'm just like, it's not. Like, it's not, but I want to learn more about it. So that is fascinating. And girl, you know your anatomy. You know your stuff. I think everyone listening now can hands down say she is a certified sex coach. She knows her stuff. She's got 10 years experience in this space of sensuality and pleasure. And that is why everyone must go onto her Instagram now, give her a follow, Eleanor Hadley, and go onto the website, because you've put so much passion and love into what you do. And I see it. Everyone else sees it. And I'm so excited. I have your Spotify playlist, guys. That is the best playlist ever. It is so sexy. I literally have it on every time I have a sexy person over. And it's just like, they love it. The vibe's good. It's always a great time. So you just give us so much. You've also got incredible books on your website that you recommend when it comes to, feminine energy or self-pleasure, or you are just a wealth of knowledge in this space. And I am so grateful that you've come on Oh Really podcast today with me, because this is such a good, amazing episode, and it's just going to help so many people. So thank you, Eleanor.
Well, it's my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. It's really, really beautiful to have that all reflected back at me. So thank you. So enjoy sharing about all things sex and pleasure. And I just want everybody out there to know that regardless of your experience of sex at the moment, you are normal. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing broken about you. And I really invite you to prioritize your pleasure.
I love that. That was the best way to end this episode. Now, everybody, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Make sure to share it. Give it a 5-star review. Message me anytime if you've got any questions. But keep tuned for next week's episode, because it's going to be amazing. Thank you again, Eleanor. And thank you, everyone, for listening to Oh Really podcast. Bye.